And we have planned to have a very short session of the three moderators just to review briefly the conference. So I promise it's not going to take more than 10 minutes. So I'm going to ask Professor McDermott, Professor Sotiropoulos, and myself to join here. And I have to apologize. Actually, I never think about breaks. Somehow I think we're still at the student level, that we are eager to hear things and we don't want to have a break. So I know we have kept you here for a very long time, continuously, but I hope it was rewarding. So you can always blame me that I don't think about breaks. That's my habit for many years. So Bill, if you would like to join us. And we will start with you, Bill, because you had the first panel. And let's try to keep it not more than 10 minutes. The clock is already counting. So 10 minutes for the three of us. So you can start.
So I actually would like to turn the whole thing over to to Mr. Sartori, sorry, Dimitri. I'm embarrassed because he was my student. But I think that maybe a major theme here is, throughout these days, is thinking about what we as teachers need to be prepared to do in this new age of AI, and thinking about how our roles are evolving, how our traditional role, as several of us said, as conveyors of information, how that role has been superseded in a lot of ways by AI, because, you know, students can find just about any information on the web or on AI. So what's critical is whether or not we've equipped them to deal with that and use that information that they're getting. And to use it, and this came up several times, use it ethically, right? And that's a critical role that I think we play as teachers. That's not a new role. You know, I would argue that we've always been ethical guides for students. It was understood that that's part of what you were doing. And it's also related to earlier conversation about civics, right? Because what we want is we want to help our students become the kind of independent thinkers and engaged thinkers that are critical to a democratic society. And again, I think for many of us, we've understood that as an ethical responsibility, but it may be even more critical now than ever before. The other role, and you know, Ron spoke to this today, and other presenters have talked about it, and that is as co-creators, right, with our students. You know, engaging with them in solving problems that are true, real problems, rather than ones that we already know the answer to. But being there to be constantly asking them questions and getting them involved in asking one another questions. So those are two of the roles, and then, you know, I think it was Tina who talked about teachers as artists. And I think that, again, that's even more important role for teachers, to be people who are experimenting in whatever sphere. The progress that I think we've made at all in education has come from people experimenting with new ideas. Athens College was an experiment. Athens College was a startup, right? Nothing like it existed before. And I believe that what history shows is that the school, the faculty here, the students have significantly impacted not just the country, but the education within the country. There are other things that I could talk about that I think came up, but I think this idea of rethinking what our role is as teachers in this age, and how is it that we can become, I talked about being students being students of their minds. How do we become students of our own minds, right? How do we think about our own learning? One of the most gratifying experiences I had was a summer course I taught for teachers. And the way I started the course was, I said, I want each of you to pick a topic or an issue or a problem that really engages you. And I want you to keep a learning log. And what I want you to do is write down your process of solving this problem, your process of answering a question. And my thinking was that it would help them better understand what their students went through. What was interesting is that a number of those teachers later let me know that they had instituted this with their students, and that it made a real difference, that students became much more reflective about their own learning process. Again, you know, I have lots of notes, but I'll hand things off. You ready?
You continue. Whatever you want.
Yeah.
Thank you. I have a few takeaways that I have retained, not only from the panel I monitored this morning, but also from other discussions. My first point is that there were always competitors to schooling, including, in the past, the mass media, the church, our parents, in the Greek environment, in the United States, perhaps homeschooling, that is, other sources of education. And this has continued in the sense that today we have many more competitors and many competitors which are formidable. For example, the AI, for example, websites, for example, various short films in YouTube, which teach what our teachers teach. So what to do about it? We need a strategy of schools, of formal schooling, to meet the challenge of these competitors. My second point is that if I had to choose among the different aims of change which should be discussing, I think the most important is teachers. They must be convinced about change. If they are not convinced about change, then regardless of how much money we spend on infrastructure, on ingenuity to have new tools of teaching, on imagination to produce new techniques of teaching, educational reform will not take place. In fact, I witnessed this change in myself because actually more than half a century ago, a very young teaching fellow by the name Bill McDermott walked into my class in this school. He was teaching world history. So we expected of him to tell us what is the textbook we are going to study. There was no textbook. What a shock for a 15-year-old pupil. So Professor McDermott assigned for 20th century history various books which had also contrasting opinions, which means that we, as pupils, adapted quickly to this new demand. And in fact, when I became a teacher myself, I was able to try to apply the same idea. My next point is that I realized yesterday and today that we talk about very big change of frameworks. It was discussed in the panel I monitored and many other panels. Example, change of framework about civic education, change of framework regarding global competences. While this is a noble ambition, I'm afraid it must be accompanied by some other small-scale changes. Have you noticed that on all or most slides that we have seen, classes are very small? There's one teacher with several or even perhaps fewer pupils. There were some slides with more pupils, but all these wonderful ideas we have discussed yesterday and today would be very difficult to implement in large classes. There's a need to think of the classroom in a totally different way if these kinds of changes we have discussed have any hope of becoming implemented. And my last point is about what to keep and what to throw away regarding the skills. We have been convinced, I think, all people here, that there is a necessity to work on basic skills from the primary education, not only reading and writing and counting, but also computer skills, and start adding, as we go to the secondary education, various other skills. Necessary it is, I think, given the risks of living in the global world, to emphasize the natural sciences and also the STEM skills. But could I add one more important skill, and this is the skill to understand what are primary values and how we think critically about primary values we all cherish. For example, freedom, equality, tolerance, pluralism. Why should I say this? Because after all these competitors I mentioned in the beginning of my short intervention now, for example, new technologies or AI are constructed by people. If they have not adopted themselves values, such as the humanistic values I mentioned, then things could go the wrong way. I thank you very much.
I feel that I don't have much to add. Δεν έχω πολλά να πω. Ήταν ένα συνεχές συνέδριο, παρόλο που είχε 3 sessions. Τα 3 sessions ήταν σαν ένα συνεχόμενο. Και εδώ θα ήθελα να ευχαριστήσω πολύ την Επιτροπή, την Εκπαιδευτική Επιτροπή, που έφτιαξε ένα τόσο ωραίο συνέδριο συνεχόμενο. Δεν υπάρχει καμία αμφιβολία ότι η τεχνητή νοημοσύνη ήταν στο κέντρο, αλλά ήταν στο κέντρο και, όπως είπαμε πάρα πολύ καθαρά, είναι απλώς ένα εργαλείο. Ουσιαστικά στο κέντρο, όπως είπε ο κύριος Σωτηρόπουλος, ήταν ο δάσκαλος. Και εκεί είναι ακριβώς που στοχεύουμε. Και η μεγάλη ερώτηση που έχω, και αυτή την ερώτηση είναι, την λέω απλώς σαν ρητορική ερώτηση στους δασκάλους που είναι εδώ, εάν μετά από τόσες ώρες που ακούτε μονολόγους και έχουμε και λίγες ερωτήσεις, ξέρετε πώς θα εφαρμόσετε αυτά τα οποία ελέγχθησαν. Δεν έχω καμία αμφιβολία ότι σας άρεσαν πολύ αυτά που ακούσατε. Το ερώτημα είναι, έχετε αρκετά εργαλεία στα χέρια σας για το πώς θα εφαρμοστούν? Και αυτό είναι το μεγάλο στοίχημα. Και θα το αντιμετωπίσουμε όλοι μαζί. Σας ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ.